Welcome to your community of fee-for-service financial advisors who are successfully building profitable firms that serve the next generation of clients. You'll learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your great life and help clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to welcome XYPN member Christine Centeno, founder of Simplicity Wealth Management, on the show today. Christine started her career in financial services at Ameriprise in 2007 and worked in a variety of broker-side roles until she ultimately decided to launch her own firm in 2019. Having just celebrated her firm's 4th birthday, she has grown quickly with over 40 client households and $400,000 of recurring revenue. How has she had so much success? You probably guessed it, she has a really well-defined niche. Christine specializes in equity compensation, and almost all of her growth from the last 2 years have been from client referrals. She also shared about her experience hitting the ceiling, realizing that she was working way too many hours and had let the business really take over her life. She hit the reset button, defined her financial mission statement, and has been really intentional about building the business to support her life moving forward. This was a really great interview that you are not going to want to miss. Without further ado, here's my interview with Christine. Feeling inspired to start your own RIA and wondering what it takes? XYPN has created a comprehensive, step-by-step guide to starting your firm on your terms. It covers all the bases, so you can confidently navigate from where you are to where you want to be. Unlike any other roadmap to independence out there, it includes templates, tools, and insights from XYPN members who have been there, done that successfully. It promises to help you get from dreaming to doing. Check it out at info.xyplanningnetwork.com/myfirm. Hey, Christine, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am super excited to dig in and learn more about your firm and your very well-defined niche and just sort of what you're building with a practice. And I think listeners are gonna really enjoy this. So, could you start by just sort of orienting listeners to you and your practice? Sort of where are you located? What is your niche? Sort of size of firm, and then we'll dig into career history from there.
Sure. So I am located in Richmond, Virginia, so about 90 miles outside of DC. My firm just turned 4 not too long ago. I refer to it sometimes as one of my children. So it's kind of like my kid just turned 4. And I work with people in equity compensation, specifically people in tech, with even a further focus in big tech. And I have about 40 client households at this point. We work with everybody in an ongoing capacity.
Okay. And are most of your clients in the Richmond area, or are they spread out?
Yeah, no, my clients are everywhere. So, a lot of West Coast, as you imagine, but all over.
So going back in time, did you always know you were going to be a financial planner?
No, I think, it's interesting. My journey to owning my own firm has been a long one. I started in the business in 2007 at Ameriprise. And it was really interesting. I was 2 years out of college at that point, having come right out of doing Teach for America in Miami-Dade. Knew that I didn't want to, Teach for America for me was, right, I want to put in my 2 volunteer years and I wanted to go back into something like business related. But I didn't even really know financial planning existed in this form at that time. And it was actually when we relocated to the Richmond area that I really started to learn more about it with that first role at Ameriprise, which of course was very sales-based and different from what I do today. But
for sure. and I will say, Ameriprise probably does as much or more actual financial planning than most, or really maybe any other large firm like them. And then, so they've sort of always had, or at least from the outside, I've never worked at Ameriprise, but from the outside, they've had a reputation for being planning centric. So did you feel that there? Did you learn financial planning while you were at Ameriprise, or were you in a little bit different of a role?
No, I had the opportunity to learn planning. I started as an advisor there, but I would just say that it was much more product oriented. It was about selling different, types of annuities and insurance. And there was some planning, mixed in. And that's really, I think from my time there, like I really enjoyed working with clients and I really gravitated towards planning. I kind of chuckle because, that's back in the day of Navaplan, if anybody remembers that. So
yeah, I think they're still like the number one Navaplan user. So so you were an advisor there. So were you building your own book of business then and going out and getting clients?
Yeah, I was. So, if anybody worked at Ameriprise during that time frame, it was, we did lunch and learns and we had dialed a lot. I remember one week I made, that was a big thing, right? We had phone clinics. One week I hit 1,000 dials.
Whoa. How many of those 1,000 people actually pick up, and then how many of those have a conversation with you? Nobody. Okay.
Well, here's it's it was actually still early enough that like the do not call list, like not everybody like knew about it yet, so they hadn't put themselves on it. But you would get a few people. I actually got a client that doesn't work. I don't work with them currently, under my new firm, but I still keep in touch with them. Okay. And that was one of those phone calls that was answered. So.
Yeah, in our last episode, we had someone who was at Edward Jones, and yeah, it's like the door knocking still works, which makes sense. I mean, it sounds like hard work. It makes sense though, but I just don't understand cold calling. Like the dialing for dollars, clearly it worked at some point, but otherwise they wouldn't, have very highly trained, expensive people. Well, I guess you're not expensive if you're only making money when you close a sale, but still, like it's just a very people intensive sales process. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess how long were you at Ameriprise then?
So for 2 years, I was there. I started in 2007. So I had wonderful timing of trying to start a commission-based business right before the financial crisis. And I was not part of a team or anything. I was building it on my own at that point. And so, basically financial crisis meant I had to reset. I mean, that was tough. From a compensation perspective. So
what did you end up doing at that point?
Yeah. So at that point, I really went more into working for teams and on the brokerage side of things. So I spent time after that at Wells Fargo Advisors as part of a team, at Morgan, at Merrill. I basically spent the first 10 plus years of my entire career on the brokerage side. So,
okay. Yeah. And I mean, all the big firms. So
yeah, all the big firms, and never doing it actually on my own after that. Right. So starting out with things in 2007 on my own for those first couple of years. And then, after that, it was always as part of a team. So
that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So then what ultimately, you worked in large firms for a long time. What ultimately led you to deciding to start your own firm and go independent?
Yeah. So, I had I always think about this a lot. Like I had a really hard and long journey. Mm-hmm. I love planning. I am passionate about planning. I was always in a situation where I loved what I did. I just didn't love where I was and who I did it with. And I think I spent a really long time struggling to find that right fit, trying to find that right team. And for me, I never did. And, I'm glad, retrospectively, looking back at that,
the
right
answer. In the middle
answer,
of it, it's painful. That's
in
tough.
the middle of it, it's so painful. Right. But yeah, I think it was just got to the point that it was okay, I have the skill set, right? At that point, I had already had my CFP, my master's in financial planning, other designations. I was ready to do it on my own, since I was never able to just find that right fit. And also really, I think I'm really passionate about, I always want to work with clients that I enjoy. Never want somebody on the calendar where I see it and I go, ugh, it's them. Right. So I was really passionate about when I started my own firm. I wanted to always be I'm so excited to talk to, right, my 2:00 coming up. I wonder what's going on with them.
I think a lot of advisors are in your position where if they could have found the right team, the right offering opportunity, then they would have stayed that way. They probably would have never launched their own business.
Yeah.
But yet I am constantly amazed at, I pretty much never been to a financial planning conference where there was a session on how to be a great manager.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just trying to think if I've ever been to a conference that actually had education on that, company culture, core value, none of that. And so I do think just historically we've been an industry that's just really bad at management because, the ones who are successful are the ones who sell the most products, not the ones who can develop
Mhm.
people. And that probably leads to a lot of issues when it comes to, finding the right fit and ultimately, again, leads to a lot of folks going out on their own.
Mhm.
So you got your CFP, your master's. When did you start to develop an interest around equity compensation?
So, interestingly enough, that was actually a while ago. So, a team that I worked with at Merrill, so, this is 2011, 2010. We were the executive services desk for two large companies on the S&P 500. So, we were the desk where we talked to the C-suite. And it was a lot of fun. Like, it was really cool taking those phone calls, and that is really where I got my experience. Again, we dealt only with C-suite, so we weren't talking to the majority of employees, but I got exposure to 10b5-1 plans. Like, I was the one that actually was responsible for sending off the paperwork, the logistics, like all of those things. So it's interesting because I learned so much during my time there, and I always really enjoyed that. And then it's funny because because of that experience I had, later when I moved on to another team and I worked at Morgan Stanley, I kind of became the subject matter expert when it came to anything equity comp, just because of that, experience with the C-suite level and the logistics of the regulatory side of it. So,
Did they have a training program on equity comp? Because it seems like equity comp is an expertise you learn by doing and just getting your
yeah.
hands dirty. It doesn't seem to be. I know there's more now, but especially then, it doesn't seem like there was much education. So was there internal
No,
education and training?
no, I just had some great teachers, some great
Mm.
coworkers.
Okay.
Nothing formal. Yeah,
Trial by
nothing
fire
formal.
for sure.
Mhm.
Because that's really complex stuff. It would be very easy to make give bad advice or answer a question
Mhm.
incorrectly just with the amount of complexity and nuance that comes with equity
Mhm.
comp, especially for executives in that big of a company. Like that's different level.
Yeah. I just think it was one of the most fun things that I've
Okay.
done in my career. So I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the challenge.
I rarely meet people who love their work more than equity comp specialists. Like for those of you who do this, like you can just tell how much y'all enjoy the work itself. I don't know. What is it about equity comp that you think is so fun and keeps you engaged?
It's the problem solving. And I also really feel like, my time on kind of what I would call like the other side of the desk, right? Like, I got a lot of good behind the scenes about how things work from regulatory perspective, operational perspective. So it's really interesting now to be helping clients and being like, oh, well, you know what? If we call into this, I know they can do this, and that for you,
Mm,
right? I know that these are capabilities, right? Because those are the things that I used to do when I sat on the other side. So,
that
but
makes
yeah, I
sense.
think the problem solving really and it's like putting together a puzzle, and it's also ever changing. Um,
It feels like a puzzle with no edge pieces or picture of the front for those of us who don't do equity comp. So you launched in early 2019. When did
mhm.
you start to have the thoughts of like, I think maybe I want to, do this my own way and start my own firm?
Yeah. So that was probably, I would say I probably started really doing some research maybe in about 2017
Okay.
is when I started looking into it. And that was just like trying to consume every piece of content that was out there, right? That, Michael put out or XYPN that you guys put out, like just trying to figure out like how do you do this? How are people
Mm.
doing this? And I took a really, really long time to kind of study up. And there's your typical right analytical planner.
Sure. What was your biggest fear, do you think, or like the biggest obstacle that you had to get over
Yeah.
for yourself to be comfortable getting started?
I just didn't really understand how it was going to work. And I think, people who come from the brokerage side will probably understand this. You just get you get told that the RIA world is like the wild, wild west and compliance is horrible. And it's almost like, how would I ever do this on my own? Right.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of it came from that, like just spending so many years on the brokerage side and not really understanding what the RIA side looked like and what it actually entailed. And so I think it was the unknown when it came to that. Like, how am I actually going to do all this by myself?
No, it makes sense, especially coming from the brokerage side. They do have more compliance requirements and oversight because of all the products, and just large firms have more oversight because they've got to regulate the actions of hundreds or thousands of reps
Mm-hmm.
and ensure compliance across the board. Yeah, and if you assume like, oh, well, that's a normal compliance program I have to self-implement in my little RIA, like, yeah, that would be impossible. And I do think we need to do a better job even today of just, compliance made easy. It's not done for you. You still got to do it, but it really is a lot easier than the brokerage side would lead us to believe.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So, what ultimately, I guess, pushed you over the proverbial edge to launching a firm? What did anything in particular happen, or you just sort of got over the hurdles of fear of compliance and ultimately launched?
Yeah, I think it was just honestly, it was more of hitting that 10-year mark and still feeling like I hadn't found the right place. I couldn't be myself.
Mm.
And I think at the 10-year mark, I was like, I can't believe I'm still in this profession, given everything that has happened over the last 10 years, but I love it. And I'm just over like trying to fit in somewhere where I just don't feel like I can be my authentic self.
That's fair. Yeah, and sometimes you have to look in the mirror and just go, well, maybe it's me and not them, and I just need to get into a new situation that's a better fit for me. That's how I
Yeah.
felt, at least. Was I came to realize it was me that needed to change. So, and again, get in a better situation. So okay, so you decide to launch January
Mhm.
2019. Did you start with the niche of equity comp? I mean, was that a day one decision, or did you grow into that?
That was not, that was a secret day one decision.
Okay.
So I knew that I wanted to do it, right? This was my chance to actually take the things that I learned and enjoyed, from years before and actually implement something on my own and really bring this knowledge to people, like to clients that weren't C-suite level. And I was really excited about that, but I will say I like chickened out about putting that on my webpage day one.
Yeah.
It wasn't until maybe I got my first like couple equity clients like that I brought those on that I really was like, okay, I'm doing this. Like we're switching like everything, messaging. And so no, not from day one. I have to admit I really did chicken out.
It can be really hard. I mean, I love it now because, folks want to go to your website, Simplicity WM, for wealth management, simplicitywm.com. And I mean, right there in the main banner, financial planning for equity compensation, create a plan for your stock comp, taxes, and more. I
Yeah.
mean, and so, but it's so often that we see that and we're like, oh, it's just so easy to just put it on your website until you have to go do it. And you're like, I don't know. And there is sort of this journey.
Yeah. Well, and part of that for me too, and just to share a little bit like personally behind the scenes at that time, when I decided to launch, obviously I wasn't working anywhere else. I don't live in a state where they let you be like dual registered. So
Mm,
I wasn't going to be working anywhere. So I had no income coming in. And my husband was also in professional school at that time too. So we had zero household income. So part of me chickening out on a niche had to do with the fact like, hey, I'll just take any client right now.
just need some revenue.
Uh,
How many clients did you work with sort of outside of your niche before you sort of dove in?
honestly, not that many. I think, really my firm was registered in very early 2019. So early, I wasn't even expecting to be approved. I didn't have a website ready to go. I didn't have anything. Um, so I wasn't actually operational until a few months later after I was approved. But I think it was, late 2019 when I really shifted that focus. I mean, just a handful of clients that were really outside the niche. Honestly, some of the very first people that came on happened to have equity comp. So,
Okay.
And I think that gave me a little bit more confidence too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that, there's always this I think they'll pay me. But then when a couple of folks actually pay you, it makes you feel a little bit better about that. Okay, this is a viable business model.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you didn't have a lot of runway with your husband in school. Like it wasn't like you could sort of, spend 3 or 4 years figuring it out, kind of want to hit the ground running.
Yeah. I mean, we did, I had saved up a year's worth of personal expenses and a year's worth of what I thought would be business expenses, but definitely underestimated.
That's fair. That does happen.
I mean, I tried. I read all the blog articles out there, but not that they were grossly over what I had estimated. But I mean, for me, it was like hit the ground running.
So you're 4 years in. So it sounds like you launched in March of 2019.
Yep.
Where is the business at today in terms of number of client households, revenue, sort of where have you made it to in year 4, I guess, closing out year 4?
Yeah. So right at 40 ongoing client households, and we will be right around 400 in revenue.
That's incredible. 400,000 in wow.
Mm-hmm.
So for listeners, this is not necessarily the typical journey. That is a little bit faster than than our averages, but that is why it's an average. It's a bell curve. But you've grown really fast, and you've really maintained a high revenue per client, which we also don't always see. Was this sort of your fee structure? Let's call it $10,000 per client. Was that sort of where you started, or has that been going up over time over these last few years?
That's been going up over time. So, where we are currently is not where I started out. I started out at a minimum of 5,000 and went up from there over time. So, and now we're at, so it's 5,000 for individuals and 6,000. We started at 6,000 for couples and partners, and now we're at 10 and 12 as our minimums. So, it's just been over that time period. So
is that is that your total fee structure where it's a flat fee, the 10,000 or 12,000? Or is there any asset component or AUM component or anything like that?
So the way that I have it set up right now, and caveat here, right? No fee structure is perfect. Just learn to live with the imperfect. I don't know, be 80% happy with it. That's how I feel about it. But the way that it works, and it actually seems to work really well for my clients, I try to really think about like matching the fee schedule to who I serve. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of my clients have their wealth at work is what I say, right? Their 401ks, their equity compensation. We're not moving it from those accounts. And I work with who I would call a younger group of clients, like in between 35 and 55. The majority of clients fit in that range. So wealth is going to be at work. So they need to pay from cash flow. But the way that the model is set up is once they hit $1 million with us at TD or Schwab, then they would transition over into our AUM fee schedule at that point.
Okay. So it's essentially, it's let's say a percentage AUM fee with a $1 million minimum, $10,000 fee, but it's not, it's not how it's marketed. Obviously it's shown as sort of this flat fee, but after you hit this certain asset level, then percentage kicks in, which I always found that fascinating. When we were first starting XYPN, people were like, no one pays for planning. You can't profitably do this. And we're like, it's just a minimum fee. Just like set a minimum number. 1% of nothing is not a good business model. You're not going to be successful with that. So just like set a minimum number that's profitable for you and go from there. And so, no, that's awesome. So, and so you're managing the investments for your clients as part of that fee then?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. And so what would you attribute? Let me ask one more question about the fee structure. Is that the same fee structure you started with? So you said the levels are different, but did you do tiered to AUM? And if not, how has that evolved?
I did not. When I first started, I actually had them separated. Okay. So planning and AUM. And For me, and that can be the right fit, I think, for some firms. Again, I think it's just important to make your fee schedule match who you serve. But for me, it was always a little bit more complicated, and maybe it was my fault, but it was more complicated for me to explain. It took longer to explain. I mean, we're Simplicity Wealth Management. I needed something that could just be simple. Yeah, we're no longer using the same fee structure we started with.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a mistake I see advisors make is they start with a fee structure and then they try to figure out the clients. And it's like, it's backwards. And I'll hear I think I should charge, $200 a month. I'm trying to figure out who I want to work with. It's like, no. Start with a client and then figure out, because I mean, you're at 40 clients, you're probably spending more time with your average client than a lot of other advisors are. And so you got to price accordingly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you just start with a fee structure or fees in mind, it usually doesn't work out very well.
Yeah.
It's backwards. So what would you attribute sort of the growth that you've had? You've brought on 40 clients in 4 years, which is, call it an average of one client a month. Where have those clients come from? How are they finding you? Because you're obviously offering a very niche solution and at a premium price. So which obviously there's value there. So where are you seeing success from a growth perspective?
Sure. So I would say early on, we had a lot of clients coming to us from find an advisor like profiles. So XYPN. Fee only, a lot were coming that way. It's interesting now. I was just looking at numbers, and it's, almost all the clients we've taken on this year so far are referrals. Last year, it was a large majority. So really pivoted now. And it's very different from, where I was 4 years ago, but now it's almost referral based. I'll be interested to see what happens this year. I'm wondering if we'll be all referrals that we're taking on this year.
That's so interesting that, I remember when I started my firm, they told me, the best way to grow your practice is client referrals. I'm like, I don't have any clients. There's no one to refer. And it does take time to build up the trust with your clients that they will refer you. And so it sounds like year 3 for you was really when those referrals started coming in. And again, you're so referable. If I work with an advisor who is a generalist who works with individuals, families, business owners, and women, I'm like, I never know when to send someone to that advisor. But I know, when someone says like, I am just trying to figure out this equity stuff and all this equity comp, and I don't understand my RSUs and ISOs, and I don't even know what these acronyms mean. It's like, well, fantastic. There's someone who specifically specializes in that. And so you just become very referable when you're working with these clients who your clients have these issues. They probably have lots of friends and coworkers with those same issues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a lot of coworkers that get referred. So.
Yeah. Do you have a concentration amongst a few firms and people who work for a few particular businesses?
Yeah. It's interesting though, like anybody who works with clients in big tech, and they know they hop quite often. So, that changes. But, with companies that, you would probably guess, so Google, Meta, and then, at any given time, depending on where clients are moving, because they move a lot, Salesforce, there's some other ones too that we have a lot of clients concentrated. And it's interesting, right? Because then you become somewhat of an expert, right? And their benefits as well, right? You have, 4 or 5 clients at one employer, and you don't even have to read the benefits package. You've learned it already. So.
Yeah. How much time does it take for you to get ramped up on a new company? Because it makes sense. It's like Google employees, refer other Google employees, but then they leave and they go to a new company or a startup or whatever. Like, how long is it a pretty time intensive process to get ramped up on a new company?
I think it depends on how in depth the benefits are, but I think at this point, that's something I've gotten, really, really skilled at doing.
After the 30th or 35th company. How are you managing, like, just keeping track of all of the clients' options and various equity comp components? Because there's such a wide range of ways that equity can be granted and vesting schedules. And if they're moving companies, like how do you keep track of all of it?
Yeah. So, I even have people's like trading windows on my calendar. I do that all the
Oh,
time.
yeah, that's a good point.
So that's a big thing that I always have. If, depending on what the trading windows are, that's actually on my calendar along with, client appointments. And we also just internally make sure that for us we use Wealthbox, but in Wealthbox we have vesting tasked out in advance as well. So we always know between the calendar and between what's going on in our Wealthbox tasks, like what's coming up for a particular client.
So there's not like a digital wallet or place to go where you can just sort of see everything in one place. You're really having to build that all out on your end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that would be awesome.
Tech idea for anyone listening.
Tech idea. That's right.
I don't know enough about it to get into that world, but no, it does seem like it's this sort of like kind of this hole that no one really knows what they have or where it is, and keeping track of everything just really is. It does seem to be a lot of manual processes. I was curious if more tech has been created to help manage that.
There's tech that's out there, that's specific to equity comp, but I think the issue there is it doesn't necessarily talk to our other tech.
Yeah.
And so, do I want to add something where I then have to go manually enter if that's what I'm doing right now? So
you've used the word "we" a couple of times in reference to the business. So do you have other advisors, admin, sort of what is the team structure, or is it just you at this point?
Sure. So I hired my first full-time employee who's in the client service associate role. That was last year. And then I have some additional part-time help, and we will also be bringing on another intern this summer as well. So.
Because you have leveraged interns from very early on. Is that correct?
Yes. So this will be our third coming up. We took one summer off, which was last summer when I was bringing on the new employee.
Okay.
But yes. Yeah.
So these are typically summer internships where you're bringing in college intern, and how do you maximize? I know the benefits for the intern. How do you get benefit from it, or is it really sort of a giving back thing for you and the firm?
So it's a giving back thing first. I think I also taught financial planning at very close to the beginning of the launch of my firm as well at a local university here for about 5 semesters. So it's important to me to give back, and I see having an intern really fill that space as well. But actually all of our, we'll see how things evolve this summer with our new intern that's coming on. But our previous interns have actually stayed out longer than summer. So we give everybody the option to do that in the past. The other interns have elected to do that as well. That's an option for our new intern in addition. So
sure. And what type of work are they doing in the firm?
Everything.
Beauty of a small business. They just have to get their hands dirty.
That's right. I think one of the biggest things, and this is, I try to structure it in a way, is like, hey, if I was, early 20s and I'm trying to figure out all the different things that you can possibly do in the financial planning field, like I know I would want exposure to different types of roles. And so I try to give them that. Not just to rate the role of what a planner does, but what about on the operations side and what's involved on the compliance side. So they really do get exposure to kind of all sides of the business.
That's awesome. They're not just scanning paperwork and sending faxes and getting people coffee like back in the day.
No. Also, we're paperless, so that's tough to do. So
I'm amazed at the number of students who still get whose internships are still helping firms go paperless. Like going in, it's just a summer of scanning, and this is like don't learn anything. So based on prior conversations that we've had, it sounds like last year, 2022, you kind of hit maybe burnout and hit a wall. Can you talk a little bit about that wall, sort of what happened?
Yeah. So, as I was sharing, for me, this is really, I can I can really think back to, late 2021 is when I think things got really overwhelming for me. I was in just a complete state of overwhelm. I was letting the business run my life, which is not a good position to be in. It was really hard because it's like, well, what do I have to complain about? I'm taking on a lot of clients, like the firm is doing really well, but it wasn't really it was turning into something that I didn't really want. And, I knew at that point, like I had to do something. A lot of it was really exacerbated by like taking on too many clients at one time in a condensed period. And since then, we've gotten pretty methodical about like when we take clients on, they will come. So I'm not, I'm never worried about that. And it just, I at that point, I think I was working too many hours and I just wasn't getting to really enjoy anything from like a personal life perspective. There was no work-life balance. And although I loved planning, I was like, I can't continue to work at this rate. And so, for me, that really was, I can think back to being at the Denver conference, and I was sitting in one of the presentations, and that was Stephanie Bogan's for Limitless. I sat in there and was actually attending with one of my friends from a mastermind group. And I turned to him and said, I'm doing that next year. That's it. Like, this is the answer. I'm doing it.
It is one of those, like, I think a lot of us have, in a way, some trauma from the first year or two of business where you're just, you live in fear of not being able to pay the mortgage or the rent. And are you going to get enough clients? And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you realize you haven't turned off the spigot because it's working. But then it's almost like we're scared to, like, well, what if it doesn't keep working? Or I remember it wasn't too long ago that I was afraid. And now, like, do I still need to be afraid? And that's a really hard transition. That's a tough, sometimes it's hard to even notice it, but it sounds like you caught it early enough that you were able to get control of the business before you effectively built the wrong business.
Yeah.
And so, but it sounds like it really did come down to like just working way too many hours, too many new clients. Because I assume in your niche, like those initial months of onboarding a new client are probably pretty intense.
They are.
So what changes have you made and sort of intentionality in order to get control back of your life?
Sure. A big part of that has been Limitless. One thing that I will say too is at the end of 2021, I did this reflective exercise, which was a thank you letter to everything that had happened over 2021. And that was such an insightful process. It was pretty much like write down everything that happened and write down those things that went wrong and then write a thank you letter to those things and write at least a paragraph for each one of those items. And gosh, did I put together some themes? Like, it was like, I read all of my answers back to myself and I'm like, well, I'm just getting into this cycle where it's like my health is right. Like I'm getting sick more often and there's all kinds of things that are happening and there's so many themes that are reoccurring in here. Okay, clearly I got to fix this. Right. So a lot of that was just starting 2022 with the Limitless program. And I'm now in year 2 with that. But I think just getting control of calendar, getting control of and being really methodical about how we spend our time as a firm, how I spend my time, where are my strengths? What are things that I need to delegate? What are we delegating to consultants? So just getting really clear on those things. And then also, I think a big part of it too is like getting really clear on like, what do I want? Right? Like what am I building? And how do I build a practice that serves my life? And so I think that is honestly what has made the biggest impact for me is just getting really clear on those things. I laugh because it's like we ask clients, all the time about what they're passionate about and what's important to them. And I really forced myself in late 2021 and early 2022 to go through that exercise myself.
Yeah, we really are our last client, last on the list, which is why I'm such a big fan of planners hiring their own planner. But it really is, most people don't. I'd say most advisors don't start their own firm with like this vision of of what the business is going to be. They start it because of their own personal passion. They want to work with a particular client. They want more flexibility in their life. And then it just sort of becomes this thing. And then you just got to wrangle it. And so what decisions did you make in terms of what you want the business to be? Did you decide you want to grow? Do you grow big, that you want to be able to expand what you're offering, that you want to stay small, be the only advisor? I guess what were some of the decisions that you made?
Yeah. So one of the biggest decisions that I made was being okay with not knowing.
But we're planners. We have to know everything.
Planners. We are. I will
we
say
have our
too,
10-year plan.
I think I was the typical planner, right? That just spent so much time analyzing things. And that is one of the biggest things I've made a change with personally. Like, I'm actually really proud of myself, the way that I'm able to like implement new things, embrace change. And I think that's just led to like huge growth within the business. So yeah, it's one of those things that's really interesting. I think being okay with where I am right now as a firm, and also being okay with the fact that I might only ever be, right, a solo, or maybe I'll build and add on another advisor. The one thing I do know is that I don't want to be this huge enterprise firm. I don't ever, this is something I always say to myself, is I don't ever want to not know who my clients are, which means the client list needs to be small enough for me to know.
And that's a really important delineation. I mean, I like to think of it as firms grow. When you're solo, you are full-time financial planner. When you start to add other advisors, you're sort of partial planner, partial business owner. And then enterprise, you're either the business owner running the business, or you've had to hire someone to run the business, which a lot of people don't like to do. And so it's like, how much of your time do you want to be spent doing planning versus running the business and running a team? Because with more people comes more internal communications and all hands meetings and that sort of thing. And that's just different than when you're solo or have a small team. So it sounds like you've made the decision to at least stay quote unquote small in terms of team size. Do you expect to hire other advisors at some point, or are you just pushing pause on that decision at this point?
I think I'm just open to it. I could see maybe being a firm that is maybe about 5 employees total, including myself. So, that might be 2 on the advisor side and 3 on the support side. But again, it's kind of funny to say it out loud multiple times, but I'm just open to kind of seeing where things lead. And I'm okay with that.
No, that's awesome. I think, Kitsis, in one of his presentations that he'll do, he talks about the solo, the boutique, and the enterprise, and that many times the boutique that has a couple of advisors, many times it is because they have such a clearly defined niche that they're growing. They've got a lot of potential business coming in, and they just love helping people with that particular problem so much. It's almost like they can't help themselves but to bring in other advisors because they want to expand the reach of what they're doing. Because it is hard for us to say, like, I know I could help more people, but I'm going to stop. I'm just going to limit it to this many clients. That can be, it's perfectly appropriate and no one should be shamed for that, but it is hard to do, particularly when you know how underserved that marketplace really is. And so those are the balancing pieces. I wish I could tell you that there was a right answer in all of this, but there's not. It's just the answer that you come up with. And it's the blessing, sometimes the curse of being the entrepreneur or the business owner, is that you get to make all those decisions and decide what it is that you want the business to be.
Yeah. And I think ultimately for me, I'm really clear on it needs to be in alignment with just my personal, financial mission statement. And if it is, great, then the firm can expand. And if it's not, I really, the reason that I built this is, again, just really to serve my life. I obviously do what I love to do and do planning, but I also want it to, serve my lifestyle as well too. I want to be happy.
Yeah. Can you, would you be willing to share your you said your financial mission statement?
Yeah, I do this with my clients. So of course, I also made myself do this, and also I always tell my clients, I joke, I practice on my husband all the time. So I ask him all these questions. He's like, I don't know. But yeah, so my financial mission statement is to first spend more time with my two favorite people outside. That's my husband and my dog. And really more specifically, like outside in nature. We love hiking. We just love all things outside. And then it's travel. We love travel. So it's traveling, but more specifically, it's travel that exposes me to different cultures and really lets us have different experiences. So something that's like fun, but also, mentally like really stimulating as well too when it comes to travel. And then the last piece of financial mission statement is to be giving of my time, talent, and dollars to, my community.
So you've really sort of, I don't know if you started it this way, but you've really aligned your sort of focus on that the business is here to support your life. And it ultimately, if it's contributing to those three statements, great. If it's not, then we got to make a change.
Yes.
I commend you for that. And I want listeners to know that I'm putting words in your mouth. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it probably wasn't an easy journey to get to this point. It's easy to say sort of after we're through the muck of getting, working through some of these issues. It sounds easy when you say it, but like that probably took a lot of work and a lot of energy and effort and tears and late nights to really get that understanding and that willingness to sort of lean into that. Is that fair?
That's definitely fair. It's been a journey. Again, I think, year 3 for me, it was hard, but it's also when I retrospectively look back, it's like, it's where I grew up as a business owner is what I tell people. It was the year that I really started to make some hard business decisions and some hard life decisions. And so, yeah, no, it's not, when I say, I have a financial mission statement, like I mean it, those things are so important to me. And that's, if the firm grows, it's because it'll be in alignment with those 3 things.
So what is the growth plan? I mean, you're in a niche that, I mean, if you wanted to have 1,000 clients, you could have 1,000 clients. I mean, you would have no problem growing to that point. It would be painful, but that just painful because growth is painful. But that does not sound like the direction you want to go. So what is sort of the growth plan? How fast do you want to bring on clients? Do you have any sort of set numbers in place now?
Yeah. Yes, of course. I have my 1 year, my 3-year plan. Interestingly enough, I really don't want to grow to be any bigger than 75 to, 85 households. That's what I say at this point.
Sure.
But, that's the goal. I don't want to be personally responsible for like meeting with that many, like an amount of households over that number. I don't think that is really conducive to really good work-life balance. So, we'll take on, it's interesting you asked that question because I've been thinking about this a lot this year specifically. And I think we're always asked, like, how many clients are we going to take on? And this year I said to myself, well, I know we're not going to take on just anybody, but for me, it's more of a revenue goal. And I'm actually challenging myself to take on less clients, but bring in more revenue. So for example, this year, my goal is to bring in $150,000 in new ongoing revenue, which is $37,500 per quarter. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be new. It doesn't all have to be new clients. Sure. And so for me, it's really more of a focus on bringing in the revenue. But I will say that we don't intend on bringing on any more than about 8 to 10 households this year. And that would be a max. I actually don't think we'll need to bring that on.
And you don't seem to have any concern whatsoever that you will be able to bring on 8 to 10 new clients. Like you're not wondering where those clients are going to come from or hoping they call. Like that is not your stressor.
No, I mean, it's something just clicked like, and it really did start last year with referrals. And this year it's just been even more. We've gotten even more. I am just floored and also just really, I'm thankful. I'm appreciative. I'm touched that clients refer, their friends to us and sometimes their family to us. But no, I'm not worried. It's funny. I was just talking to my husband the other night and I was like, oh, I think I know where our clients, like all of our clients are coming from for the next like quarter to, 6 months or so. And, yeah, this is doable.
Well, and I know I sound like a broken record from, 9 years now of preaching this message, but it's like, it's the power of a niche. It really is. And it's scary up front because and you traveled down this path of like, it's hard to tell people no, it's hard to put on your website and exclude 99% of the population that do not fit your niche. But you only want the 1% that actually, has this particular problem. But it also like, it's a snowball that starts rolling, and honestly, it's a hard snowball to stop, which I think you kind of experienced last year. But that is, you're just a case study in like the power of a niche and how to build a practice that really supports your lifestyle and supports your great life, and why having the benefits of having a niche to help do that.
Yeah. It's, I think again, a lot of our clients refer coworkers, and it's just, it's amazing. It's, to me, I'm still always impressed when I'm like, oh, that's, so nice. Like we must be doing something right.
So true.
Uh-oh.
Well, listen, as we're coming up on our time together, I'll ask you the final question, and that is, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you knew back then, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
I know exactly what to tell you. Start my firm 5 years sooner.
Do you really think, would you have made more mistakes or had you started earlier, or really just, would you just be 5 years ahead of where you're at today?
I mean, I'm sure it would have made more mistakes.
That's fair.
I think the thing for me is because of my background, I had the industry experience, right?
Yeah.
I didn't have the confidence. And, I started right away as an advisor in 2007. And when I launched my firm, I mean, I didn't bring anybody over. It was zero revenue to the firm, zero household income, but I had the skill set to do it. And I just wish I would have had like the confidence to do it earlier.
That's fair. Any advice for those who are struggling with confidence on how we can help, and we as an industry can help folks develop that confidence? Because I'm also always cognizant, like I don't ever want to oversell it either. Like, and I don't want to push people in doing something they shouldn't do, but also, we do meet folks where we're like, you have everything it takes. You just need the confidence. So like, any advice for those who are struggling with that?
I think it's, and this is what I really struggled with too, because I didn't really, unfortunately, I didn't really find a lot of this, but I think finding a community, right, until XYPN and all of that. But had I found that earlier, I think that probably would have accelerated, my decision to launch a firm. But it's, having a mentor, it's reaching out, it's finding examples, finding examples of, and unfortunately too, it's like always the examples that resonate are people that look like you. Well, there's not a lot of those around in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
And, I think, and that's also why I'm really passionate about like giving back and having interns and educating, and why I taught and all of those things, because I feel like the examples need to be out there. But I would just say, finding a community, finding somebody that you can, that can mentor you, that you can bounce, questions off of. And, whether that's like you're in a mastermind group or whether your community is, you're just reading the blog or listening to the podcast, right? It's, I think that's just so important because the examples are out there. And I think for me, and I don't think this is the case, as much anymore, but for me, I didn't always know where to look for those.
Right. No, it's a great point. Well, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for taking the time to come on the show and share your story. You've had an incredible, success journey here for the first few years. And to be 4 years, just over 4 years in business is really just incredible. And I commend you for developing that intentionality to build the business that's going to support your life versus, living to work, which is not why we became entrepreneurs. So thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you.
Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private Facebook group for fee-for-service advisors. It's a community you've been looking for that's there to provide support no matter where you are in your journey. Best of all, it's free. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP.
Thanks for listening to XYPN Radio. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to leave a review that will help grow the movement of fee-for-service advisors, serving next-gen clients and building the firms of their dreams. That's all for today's episode. Until next time.